Hello everyone. Thanks for watching my last video presentation for our budgeting and strategic planning class. The name of my presentation, as you can see, once again is Speaking French, but this time it is at a community college, or actually at several community colleges. So for my final project, I decided to evaluate and do some research on budgeting, of course, and strategic planning and athletics at community colleges within Virginia. So I know that sounds a little bit crazy, and I'm going to break it down for you how I went about doing this. So there are 23 community colleges in Virginia, and I researched them all. I researched them to find out which ones of them had athletics. And out of the 23, 9 of those schools appeared, according to their websites, to have athletics. I contacted all of those schools, even though I was interested in contacting the athletic directors, which normally schools would have when they have athletics. Some of them did not have athletic directors, so I tried to work around that and contact someone within athletics in general. So while some emailed me back, very few, I'll tell you in a moment, others just sent me on a wild goose chase trying to figure out who would be best suited for me to conduct my interview with. And honestly, being bounced from person to person to person to person, I found very, very frustrating. And I think that it's going to be very beneficial for community colleges to have an athletic director. I think that would help them out a lot, and it would give a lot more balance and guidance to their athletic program. So there's my input on that. So out of the 9 that I contacted, 4 responded to me. Out of those 4, I was only able to interview 2. And this is even after I contacted coaches as well, trying to get just anybody that I could basically at these institutions to partake in my interview. But I'm working with what I've got, and I hope that you will be able to learn a lot and that you enjoy this presentation. Okay, so the 2 people that I was able to interview, one of them was, in fact, an athletic director, and he's also a baseball coach, and that is Rod Reedy, and he is from New River Community College. The other that I interviewed was Latina Giles, and she is from Southside Virginia Community College, and she is actually the student activities coordinator, and this is one of the schools that bounced me around quite a bit. Latina, this is actually her first job, and she did not play sports in college, and so I think this is a really interesting role for her, and it's very interesting that she was willing to answer my questions about athletics and strategic planning and budgeting. Rod, however, played club sports in college, and he's been an athletic director for a lot of his life and a lot of his career, but this was done at a high school level previously. So even though it was at a high school level, I felt like he had a lot of experience, and so some of his answers were a little bit more in depth than Miss Latina's were. Nonetheless, I was grateful for them both having answered my questions. Okay, the questions I asked, I'm not going to read these off to you, but as you can see, some of them I took from our initial interview assignments because I still needed to ask them about budgeting, and I still needed to ask them about strategic planning. But this time I had a little bit more emphasis on athletics, and a lot of times at these community colleges that I was researching, their programs are pretty new, and so I wanted to see what it was like for a startup of an athletics program. I also wanted to know what their previous background was, and I already have told you about their previous background. And I was curious why they wanted to work at a community college and what they thought would be helpful for someone going into this field. Because working at a community college is a whole different animal, as Dr. Duggan can well tell us, because she spent a lot of her time working with community colleges. But it's just very different than working at, say, an NCAA institution or even an NAIA institution. So these are the questions that I asked, and I felt like that they were pretty thorough questions, and it should help me get a lot of information. But you live and learn, and I have realized I should have possibly added some more questions towards the end. Okay, so these are my findings. And basically, what I found out for one of the major things that didn't surprise me was that athletics are placed behind academics, of course, because anywhere you go, you're expected to be a student athlete, not an athlete student. And so that's something, again, it was not finding that's one of the similarities that community colleges have with NCAA schools. Also, the question about the mission and the strategic plan, they gave me very vague answers, but they did say enough to where I knew that they tried to align the strategic plan with the athletic strategic plan, even though they didn't give me much of that information. And as one of them said, athletics works hand in glove, which means right beside. I had to look that up because I didn't know what that meant and I didn't want to ask. But it means it goes basically hand in hand with each other. As I said, they didn't give me a lot of details about their strategic plan, and I wish that I had been able to gather more information on that and been able to have just more contacts with them. I would like to have been able to do this in person, but that took time and resources that I did not have available to me. So they also both talked about how athletics helps with retention rates, which I would have never thought would be an issue at a community college, since normally these are 2-year institutions, but apparently retention is an issue, and having athletics and being an athlete encourages you to want to stay there. They also use it as a recruitment tool, which, of course, we all know athletics are a big drawing point for people in high school that have played athletics and they want to continue that while they're pursuing their higher education. Okay, so like I said before, one of the things that I was very curious about was startups. And I was very fortunate that one of them was very key in starting up 3 new programs at their school. So they talked about that the startup costs were actually very low, which I found to be surprising. But after we talked more, I understood that the budget is, from what it seems, is very tight, and they have to be very conscious. So starting up can't be expensive, or they would not be able to do that. So even at the other institution, they were not, this is a little off of the startup topic, but I think this is important to talk about. They are funded by student activity funds, which I found very interesting. But so they are taking advantage of the resources that they have available to them, using practice spaces that are free, and they're just really taking advantage of not having to purchase equipment. They borrow equipment from a local high school, and they're still getting the job done, and they're just saving a large amount of money from not having to purchase these. Volleyball standards cost about $3,000, and that's money that this institution just does not have. The other thing that we talked about was how important it is to find the right coach. that is key. And they discussed how this is really important because you're putting in a lot of hours and you still have to be very committed, but you're working on a really small stipend. So when they're starting up, it is so important for them. It's one of their major things is focusing on finding a good coach that's going to be dedicated and that they are not doing it for the money, because the amount of hours that anybody in athletics realizes this, but the amount of hours that you pull is not nearly what it should be for the amount of money that they're going to get paid. Okay, so my thoughts on this were that they are operating on a very, very tight budget. I am very curious, and I would like to go back and get a chance to do this project a little bit more in depth and get to go and talk to these people at different community colleges and get copies of their budgets and copies of their strategic plan. It is very interesting to me. So I really enjoyed this project, but I just wish I had some more information for myself and to share with you all. But as I said, I'm very curious to see what they actually run their athletics on, like how much money they are spending, because I do not think that they are being given a large amount from their community college. I think that they're having to fundraise a lot for this money and just work really strictly on that budget. And with that being said, I think that they didn't name their budget as this, but I'm willing to bet that they are using the accountability-based budget, and so we know that's where every penny they're being monitored on, and they're having to say, hey, I spent this on this because I did this. And I think that that is probably the best way for them to do this at a community college, working on that very tight budget. And that's the same that I found from looking at the private school I evaluated, looking at Averett, is that they're being very conscious of all their pennies and making sure that nothing is misused, and hopefully that it's aligning up with their mission statement and their strategic plan as well. So during this assignment, I tried to view it more administratively instead of thinking about it as a coach, which is very different for me, as most of you know. And I think that the major things that I learned from viewing it that way is how important it is to be selective in the hiring process. So if I'm ever an athletic director at a community college, which is one of the reasons why I decided to go in this direction and to look at this, because that is something that I could possibly do in my future career path that could take me that way. But I will just be very, very selective in my hiring process. Due to the low funding, it is so important to make sure that the people you're interviewing, that their motives are in the right place. Because as one of my interviewees said, sports live or die on coach's shoulder, and especially at this level. If you don't have a coach that's dedicated and willing to commit some time to these students that are here only for 2 years, that's such a short time period to try and get what you can out of your athletes. And so it's going to be really important to make sure that they are doing this for the right reasons. Next, I think it is so important to be conscious. This is crucial due to having such a tight budget. It's very important with the being selective part as well, that I would be hiring trustworthy coaches who understand how to budget the funds that they are given, and they need to understand that they're having to be this tight-walleted, if you will, because of the mission statement, and that they're going to have to make sure they're working within the lines of the college's strategic plan. And this is just so important. I think that the community colleges that are successful are the ones that are operating this way. Okay, so this is my plan. Again, like I said before, I think the schools that are being successful are the ones that are being selective and that are being very conscious of where their money is going and who the who they're hiring. And lastly, I think that there needs to be more communication with the CFOs and the presidents of the community colleges. And this is something that if I'm ever an athletic director at a community college, I'm going to strive to do. I think it is so important for us to be able to have that transparent communication with both of them about the mission plan. I mean, about the mission statement and about the strategic plan. And I think it's important for them to understand that my goal is to highlight and to help push our mission statement. These athletes are coming here to go to college and they need to understand that we are working towards this common mutual goal with the institution as a whole. It's not just athletics by themselves. And I think that when we can bridge that gap and when we can make sure that we are working with them and trying to make sure that athletics values are aligned with the strategic plan and with the mission statement of the community college, then the president or the CFO is going to be more likely to try and push some money towards athletics, and that's going to be very beneficial to athletics. And so that communication piece, if they understand where we're coming from and see that we understand where they're coming from, I think that that will be very, very helpful. And again, with the budget, I think that the best way to budget at a community college is through that accountability based budget. I think it is so important that people that we're hiring are being very conscious and are being held accountable for the funds that they are spending. Well, that is all that I have for you guys, and I wish I had more information for, like I said, for myself and for you all, but I still feel that I learned a lot, and I hope that you all have learned some stuff from my presentation, and I hope that you enjoyed it and I didn't bore you too much. And it's so exciting to think now we know how to speak French even more fluently. This budgeting and strategic planning isn't too bad, is it, guys? Well, I will talk to y'all on the next forum. Have a nice rest of your week.